This is the Triumph Daytona 955i, a 955cc inline 3-cylinder engine producing 150 horsepower at the crank. A monster of a motorcycle. I absolutely love this bike. But what is it like getting on a big motorcycle for the very first time? Well, let's jump on and let's find out. Going from a 125cc motorcycle to something like this is a pretty big jump, and I'd heavily recommend that you move on to something that's a little bit more intermediate, maybe like a 650 parallel twin or maybe an A2 motorcycle, before you have a look at jumping on something like this. Or God forbid you decide to start riding on one of these motorcycles as a beginner like you can do in the United States and such. I wouldn't recommend that you do that. Please start off on something that is a little bit smaller, a little bit more easier to ride. Something where if you make a mistake, it's not catastrophic. On something like this, you're going to be going very fast, very quickly. If you make a mistake, you pretty much had it. Alright, these bikes are ridiculously fast and ridiculously light. They're very, very good at what they do, but they're not very beginner friendly. Unfortunately, I feel like I have to say that because so many people in places like the United States think that it's a good idea to start off on a bike like this. It really isn't, you guys. Right, yes, these are fun bikes. Yes, they're really good bikes. But you really should have a couple of years experience before jumping on one of these things. Alright, please heed that advice, alright? Any motorcyclist worth their salt would say the same thing. Any motorcycle instructor. Because, like, riding one of these things might seem fairly easy, you know, kind of like just on the face of it, but it really does get quite serious quite quickly on a bike like this if you aren't careful. And whereas on like a 125 or a 250, 300, you can pull that throttle back 100% and the bike will take a while to spool up. On a bike like this, you don't even have to give it 5% throttle before you're feeling a significant amount of power. So yeah, you guys, please heed that advice. But anyway, let's get into the main section of the video. So, well, what is it like to jump on one of these things for the very first time? What have you got to look out for? What things have you got to do to adjust? Well, even though a bike like this is quite a lightweight bike for its size, for its class, it is fairly heavy. So if you are going from a 125 or a 650cc, maybe even A2, this bike is going to feel, well, from 125 or from an A2, significantly heavier. But from a 650, it's the weight difference isn't too bad, isn't too different. But yeah, this bike weighs 210 kilograms wet, I think, is estimated. So that might sound like an awful lot, but when you're riding on the bike, it really isn't. I've ridden bikes that are significantly heavier. I mean, my ZLR is 260 kilograms wet. My ZH2 is 240 or 230. It's, you know, and things like gold wings and what have you, I mean, you're talking well over 300 kilograms wet for something like a gold wing or a BMW RT. I don't know. You know, these bikes are huge and very, very heavy. But that's probably the first thing you're going to notice is that weight in between your legs. So when you first start riding, be confident, alright, because obviously the faster you're going, the easier it is to balance one of these motorcycles, but just be wary of the weight of the bike when you're starting to slow down. Especially if you are a shorter person, it might be a little bit harder. I mean, I'm 5'11", and it's fairly comfortable for me on a bike like this, even though this bike sits fairly tall. But that is something to consider first, is perhaps the weight of the motorcycle when you're first getting used to it, because it is going to feel quite heavy. But the next thing is, of course, the power. That's going to be the next thing that you feel on a motorcycle like this. The power output is just out of this world. I mean, you're talking like from a 125, you're talking over 10 times the power, 15 times the power or torque of a 125. It is crazy. 5 times from something like a, well, in fact, maybe a little bit, well, no, two times rather. 2 times from a parallel twin, 650, something like that. 2 or 3 times that of an A2 bike. It is outrageous what these bikes can do. And the thing is as well, power on a motorcycle kind of grows exponentially. So, like, say double the power might not sound like an awful lot, but when you're on a motorcycle that doesn't really weigh that much, the difference in feel between a 650 parallel twin and this is just astronomical. It is literally night and day. It's one of those things that will make you oh god, it will be jaw dropping. I remember the first time I got on my ZZR 1400. Oh my goodness, what an experience that was, that first ride. I was absolutely mind blown. I was like, how can a motorcycle be this powerful? And then when I start this channel, all of a sudden I realised that is quite a common thing to find. That a lot of these bikes, when you're talking 1000cc, 600cc, are all insanely quick and insanely torquey. They've got so much power. I mean, that's not really the case with a modern day Fireblade or R1, where you're getting not a lot of power in the lower RPMs and they're getting all the power in the last 2 or 3 or 4,000 RPMs. On a motorcycle like this and older super sports, you're getting a lot more torque, a lot lower down in the rev range, which is why I prefer these kinds of motorcycles. But yeah, depending on which bike you go for, you are going to see quite a substantial difference in power, and I'm talking huge, a huge amount. Even going from like my Ninja 650, well, ER6 is what it was, but yeah, Ninja 650 pretty much. Even going to that from my 125 was astronomical. The throttle response was just out of this world. And then can you imagine getting that feeling again when you upgrade to a 1400? It is crazy, you guys, the performance that's on tap on a motorcycle, and a motorcycle that is cheap. This bike cost me £1,850. Yes, it's 2003, so it is pretty old now by today's standards. And no, it's not producing as much power as super sports of today, but it doesn't matter. These bikes are just out of this world fun, but it's a lot of bike for not a lot of money, you guys. It's yeah, it's very easy to buy a motorcycle like this in the UK and be totally overwhelmed by it, because that's pretty much what happens. If you're not expecting it, if you're not ready for it, it can be quite an eye-opening experience, so to speak. But what a bike, man! What a motorcycle! I'd never go back to a smaller bike, not after being on these. I absolutely love these bikes. They are some of the best you'll ever ride. But having said all that, I wouldn't let it put you off. All right, like, yes, it's going to be quite a shock to begin with, but once you've been riding it for a little bit, you'll get the hang of it. You'll get used to it, and you'll really start appreciating what these motorcycles can do. And they can do a lot. When you're talking 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, I mean, give me a list of cars that cost less than 100 grand that can do 0 to 60 in under 3.5 seconds. There aren't that many. And how much are you going to be paying? You know, like 100 grand, that's a lot of money for a car. Well, £1,500 for or let's say £2,000 for a motorcycle like this? Pence, that's nothing for the amount of horsepower that you've got on tap. Woohoo! Damn, this bike is fun. Sorry, let's just slow down a little bit. That's the problem. It will get to a point where you'll be comfortable on the bike, and all you'll want is just power, 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 power all the time. And these bikes, they'll play as hard as you want to, as hard as you want them to. They honestly, they'll rev out ridiculously high. I mean, this bike is 11,500 RPM, but a lot of the later models are higher than that. Later kind of like Super Sport, 1000 Super Sports are higher than that. But just, oh man, you just get brought in by the adrenaline rush that these bikes give you, and it is an adrenaline rush. Right, if you are into roller coasters and stuff like that, you will like this. If you're not, then this will probably, yeah, scare the shit out of you. All right, but I love it, absolutely love it, man. It's just one of those things that just doesn't get old, never gets boring. When you've had a hard day, stressful day at work, bikes like this just make it all melt away. Absolutely wonderful. What a wonderful thing. Oh, it is amazing. It is absolutely breathtaking. But yeah, so we spoke a lot about the power and the weight. But I mean, the size of the bike is going to seem a little bit intimidating to begin with, because from 125 or an A2 motorcycle, these bikes have quite a bigger profile, quite well, it's a noticeable profile. You know, the seating position is going to be more aggressive as well, or no, it depends on the motorcycle, but we're talking specifically about a Super Sport here. So like, if you're going from my wife's on Ninja 125, for example, and then you go from that to this is significantly more aggressive in terms of the ergonomics. You're leaning forward a hell of a lot more, there's a lot more pressure on your hands. Your knees are up a little bit higher, of course, it's that racing position. That's on this motorcycle, but of course you are going to get a lot of bikes that aren't like that. You're going to get a lot of bikes that are insanely comfortable, if anything more comfortable than a Ninja 125, with a very, very nice riding position. But once you get to this level of motorcycle, there's quite a lot of variance in the bikes that are out there. There's quite a lot of different types of riding experiences you can have. But yeah, the size of it is going to seem intimidating at first, but once you start riding, you'll get the hang of it very, very quickly. Don't worry about it. One interesting thing is braking isn't actually going to feel that different from 125. The braking systems are going to be more powerful, but not noticeably. You know, you're still going to have this a very similar braking distance between a 125 going the same speed as something like this. If anything, the braking distance might even be a little bit better on a motorcycle like this, but it's not ridiculous, it's not crazy, it's not really something that you need to worry about. If I don't know, I don't think so anyway. You know where the brakes are, you know how they work. It's not really going to be anything to worry about, and that's going to be the last thing that you'll be thinking about when you're riding a motorcycle like this, is how are the brakes going to feel. You're just going to use them as you should. But also throttle response, I mean, we did mention that a little bit in passing when we were talking about the power of the motorcycle, but yeah, the throttle response is going to feel massively different to a 125 or an A2 bike. Clutch is going to feel, probably, if anything, clutch is going to feel a little bit heavier. They tend to on bigger motorcycles, they tend to feel heavier, but not outrageously so, not to the extent that, you know, it's going to be hard to pull back the clutch or let the clutch out, hard to control, not in the slightest. But just take it easy though, take it easy with the clutch, take it easy with the throttle, use low revs until you get used to the motorcycle. Just like how we practice our clutch control, just use the idle revs. Use the idle revs of the bike to get used to that clutch feel, to get used to that throttle response first, rather than worrying about the throttle response of the bike. Because remember, you can ride a fast thing slowly. All right, like look, I'll just demonstrate here. We are on a bit of a hill, but just over 1000 RPM. All right, this is just clutch. Okay, just get used to doing that, so you get an idea of how the clutch is going to feel, and then when the clutch is fully engaged, use the throttle. But be gentle with everything the first time you get on the bike. Take it easy. You don't have to go quickly anywhere. Take your time, don't rush it. And then when you feel a little bit more confident, start pulling on that throttle a little bit more. Start getting off the line a little bit quicker. You just take it step by step, little by little. And you'll get the hang of it really quick, you guys. I mean, that's the thing. If you've been riding for a couple of years, you get on something like this, because you know what you're doing. You know how a motorcycle works. I mean, you can check out the videos that me and my wife have done where she rides bikes like this for the first time. She rides my ZH2. She rode my ZX9R. And she's only on a 125. And she's been riding her 125. Well, I mean, she's retired from riding for the time being, but she has been riding her 125. Well, exclusively. She's on a CBT. She's a learner rider. But she knows how a motorcycle works. And she picked it up very, very quickly. Riding bikes like this, she picked it up incredibly quickly. Yes, nervous, maybe a little bit scared, but once she got the hang of it, she was flying. And you will too. But if you want an idea of what it's going to feel like for you, then definitely go and check out those videos. If I remember, I'll leave them either in the video description or I'll leave them at the end of the video pinned there for you. But yeah, check them out, and then you'll have a pretty good idea of what it will be like the first time you get on a bike like this. But it's fine. It's okay. It's not as hard as it looks, which is why it's not recommended for a beginner, because it might seem very easy. Like I said, on the face of it, it might seem very easy, but then all of a sudden you could get yourself in quite a pickle, because the clutch is going to bite a little bit harder than you were expecting, the throttle response is going to bite harder than you were expecting, and then you'll end up looping the bike and you'll be on your ass. You know, it's just things like that that really you should be trying to avoid, and the only way you can avoid that is by getting a little bit of that experience on something smaller, on something that will not loop, or at least not loop as easy as something like this would. But genuinely, you guys, it's not a hard thing to grasp, and you'll be fairly comfortable after a day of riding. You should be comfortable riding bigger bikes after a day. But the one thing to keep in mind is that they're not really any different to an A2 bike or a 125. They ride the same. The techniques you need to use to ride them are the same. You just have to have a little bit more discipline. You know what I mean? A little bit more discipline, and then you'll be fine. If you can have that, if you control this hand, your right hand, your throttle hand, control your thirst for power and speed, then you'll be okay. And I say control, I don't mean never do it. I mean do it at the right times, do it when it is safe. Do it when you've got no traffic around you, do it when you've got no police around you. But do it in a safe area where you can pretty much hedge your bets that nothing bad is going to happen because of you know, traffic or other elements that are outside of your control. The bike is fully in your control, and that's the one thing you need to keep in mind. But there is going to be that learning stage. There is always with motorcycles. There's always going to be that learning stage and that confidence building, because you're going to be nervous, you're going to be scared. But I'm telling you, 1 to 2 days riding on it, you'll be over the moon with it, and you will not be able to stop riding. You'll be riding it all the time. You're going to want to ride it all day and all night. That is the effect that these motorcycles have. Well, that's what they have on me anyway, but I'm sure that they'll have that same effect on you as well. But anyway, everybody, thank you ever so much for joining us on our ride out today. And we've done a video like this before, funnily enough. We did it as when we had our Honda CBR 600RR. That was a long time ago. I mean, that was 4 years ago now, I think, is when we did that video. So I thought it was probably due an update. But it probably hits a lot of the same notes that this video does. And I mean, really, a better analog would have been a 600 or something like that, because that's the next logical step from something like an A2 rather than a 1 litre But unfortunately, this is the smallest bike we have. We've got the H2, which is a 998cc. We've got the ZZR, which is a 1441cc. We've got the Blackbird, which is a, well, I can't remember the exact displacement, but 1100cc. 955 is the smallest displacement that we've got in our current lineup of motorcycles, which is quite a crazy thing to say. But yeah, this is the only bike I really had, unfortunately. But yeah, you guys, if you've enjoyed this one and if it's helped you out, if it's settled your nerves a little bit when it comes to riding bigger motorcycles, then please go ahead and leave that like, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell down there. I'd really appreciate it if you do that. We're close to getting 20,000 subscribers. Let's see if we can get there in the next month. I'd really appreciate it. But yeah, if you've got any other tips or tricks for first time riders of motorcycles like these, then of course drop it down in the comment section below. I'm sure they'd really appreciate it as well. But yeah, thanks again everybody, take care, ride safe, we'll catch you all in the next video. Have a good one. Woo!